The land of Judah lay between hills, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, its valleys marked by stone walls, vineyards, and the memory of promises spoken long before. In the days when kings sat upon thrones of cedar and judges ruled at the gates, the villages of the lowlands lived quietly beneath the shadow of greater cities. It was from one such place, the rural settlement of Maresheth, that Micah emerged. He was not born into courts or trained among scribes of the palace. His voice was shaped by fields and flocks, by the cries of the poor, and by the slow grinding of injustice that pressed upon ordinary lives. When Micah began to speak, he did not speak for himself. His words carried weight, as though the earth itself leaned closer to listen. The era was one of tension and division. Kings ruled both in Samaria and Jerusalem, and their reigns stretched across years of expansion, corruption, and quiet fear. Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah held power in Judah, while the northern kingdom staggered toward its collapse. Beneath their rule, land was seized, debts multiplied, and those without power were pushed aside. Micah saw these things not from afar but from the soil itself. He watched fields taken by decree and homes stripped from families who had no defense. His message did not rise from theory or ritual. It rose from lived experience. When he spoke, it was as one who had walked the furrows of loss and understood the cost of silence. And Cause's first cry was not directed to one city alone. He'd summoned the entire land, calling both Samaria and Jerusalem to account. His words stretched beyond borders, as if echoing across mountains and valleys alike. He spoke of a witness rising against the nations, a presence that would tread upon the high places of the earth, causing them to melt and split like wax before fire. Micah 1:2-4. This was not imagery meant to soothe. It was meant to awaken. The strongholds that kings trusted in, the walls they believed eternal, were shown to be fragile when weighed against righteousness. Samaria, proud capital of the northern kingdom, stood as the first sign. Micah spoke of its fall as though it were already unfolding, its carved images shattered, its wealth scattered, its foundations laid bare. Micah 1:6-7. These words were not distant warnings. Within years, Assyria would march through the land, and Samaria would be reduced to rubble. Yet Micah did not speak as a spectator of judgment. He lamented openly, mourning like one who had lost family, stripping himself of comfort, walking barefoot as a sign of grief. His sorrow revealed the heart behind the warning. Destruction was never spoken lightly. From Samaria, the vision turned toward Judah, one by one. Micah named towns along the invasion route, weaving prophecy with geography, each place becoming both symbol and reality. The disaster that had overtaken the north now approached the gates of Jerusalem. The capital, long confident in its chosen status, felt the tremor of coming judgment. Micah's voice rose not in triumph but in urgency. What had been ignored in prosperity could no longer be dismissed when danger stood at the door. As the narrative deepened, Micah turned from cities to people, from walls to hearts. He exposed the hidden machinery of injustice that operated beneath polite appearances. Powerful men lay awake at night devising ways to seize land, rising at dawn to carry out their plans because they had the strength to do so. Micah 2:1. Homes were taken, inheritances erased, families uprooted not by war but by law twisted to serve greed. Micah did not soften these accusations. He named them plainly, showing that oppression did not require swords when systems could accomplish the same end. Those who benefited from such practices did not remain silent. They pushed back against Micah's words, telling him to stop speaking of disaster, insisting that no harm would come. They appealed to tradition and confidence, claiming that favor could not be withdrawn. Micah answered them with sharper clarity. If their actions had been upright, his words would have brought comfort rather than alarm. The discomfort they felt was not caused by prophecy, but by guilt. Yet even in rebuke, Micah carried a thread of hope. He spoke of a remnant gathered, a people brought together like sheep in a fold, led forward by one who would break open the way before them. The image stood in contrast to the chaos described earlier. Judgment was not the final word. Beyond scattering lay restoration, though the path would be narrow and costly. The focus then shifted to leadership, and Micah's voice grew more confrontational. He addressed rulers directly, those entrusted with justice yet skilled in cruelty. They tore the skin from their people, breaking bones as though preparing meat for the pot. Micah 3:1-3. The language was stark, chosen to shock listeners into recognizing the violence of exploitation. These leaders cried out in prayer when trouble came, but Micah declared that their cries would meet silence. For they had shown no mercy when it was within their power. Micah 3-4. Prophets and priests were not spared. Those who spoke for reward and declared peace only when their mouths were filled were exposed as merchants of reassurance. When challenged, they promised favor. When unpaid, they threatened judgment. Micah declared that night would fall upon such visionaries, that revelation would darken, leaving them without guidance. Authority, when detached from integrity, became emptiness. The heart of the accusation settled upon Jerusalem itself. Its leaders judged for bribes, its priests taught for payment. Its prophets practiced divination for silver, yet they claimed security by invoking the presence of the Lord among them. Micah shattered this false confidence. He declared that Zion would be plowed like a field, Jerusalem reduced to ruins, and the mountain of the house overgrown. Micah 3:12. These words struck deeply, for they challenged the belief that sacred space guaranteed safety. Holiness, Micah insisted, was not maintained by location, but by justice. The tone shifted as the vision expanded beyond immediate destruction. Micah lifted his gaze toward a distant horizon, where the mountain of the house would be established above others, drawing nations seeking instruction and peace. Micah 4:1-2. Swords would be reshaped into tools for cultivation, and war would give way to learning. This future was not rooted in dominance, but in shared understanding. Each person would sit beneath vine and fig tree without fear, for instruction would guide their steps. Micah 4:4. This promise did not erase present suffering. Micah acknowledged pain yet to come, exile that would drive the people even to distant lands. Micah 4:10. The path to renewal passed through loss. Still, he insisted that deliverance would arise, that captivity was not abandonment. Even when nations gathered against Jerusalem, believing they could defile it, they did not understand the deeper purpose unfolding. Their gathering would become their undoing, their strength used against them. As the narrative approached its center, Micah spoke of a ruler, unlike the kings he had condemned. From Bethlehem, small among clans, one would come whose origins reached back beyond recorded memory. Micah 5:2. This leader would stand and shepherd with strength, bringing security when external threats loomed. The contrast was deliberate. Where current rulers exploited, this one would protect. Where they sought power, he would bring peace. Micah described a remnant moving among nations, sometimes as dew bringing life, sometimes as a lion among flocks. Unstoppable and free, identity would no longer depend on political dominance but on purpose shaped by righteousness. Alongside this vision, Micah spoke of purification. Instruments of war would be removed, fortified cities dismantled, practices of manipulation and fear cut off. Micah 5:10-14. Security would be rooted not in force, but in trust. The narrative then returned to confrontation, framed as a legal dispute. Micah called the mountains and enduring foundations of the earth as witnesses while the case was laid out. The charge was not obscure. The people were asked what burden had been placed upon them, what injustice had been done. The response recalled deliverance from bondage, guidance through the wilderness, protection from curses intended to destroy. Memory itself testified to faithfulness received. In response, a question arose from the people. What offering could satisfy such a claim? Burnt offerings, rivers of oil, even the firstborn, were suggested as possible answers. Micah 6:26-7. Micah cut through the confusion with clarity that is echoed through generations. What was required had always been known: to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. This was not ritual complexity, but ethical simplicity, demanding and transformative. The indictment continued. Dishonest measures, violence, deceitful speech filled the city. Micah 6:10-12. Wealth gained through injustice would not satisfy. Effort would yield little, harvests would fail, and security would remain elusive. Micah 6:13-15. These consequences were not arbitrary punishment, but the natural outcome of a society unmoored from integrity. The final movement of the narrative turned inward. Micah spoke as one surrounded by absence, where loyalty had vanished and trust eroded even within families. The description was intimate and raw, revealing the personal cost of societal collapse. Yet even here, hope flickered. Micah declared his intention to watch and wait, confident that light would follow darkness. He acknowledged failure openly, accepting discipline while trusting in restoration. The enemy's gloating would not endure. Boundaries would be rebuilt, influence restored, and people gathered once more. Micah 7:11-12. Shepherd imagery returned, invoking care, guidance, and provision. The nations would witness acts reminiscent of ancient deliverance, marveling at power exercised through mercy. Micah 7:15-17. The narrative closed not with judgment but with wonder. Micah asked a question that served as both conclusion and invitation. Who is like the one who forgives wrongdoing, who passes over rebellion, who delights in mercy? Anger does not endure forever. Compassion rises again, subduing guilt and casting failures into depths beyond recall. Micah 7:18-19. Promises spoken to ancestors remained alive, carried forward by faithfulness that did not waver. Micah 7:20. Thus the voice from Eresheth fell silent, but its echo remained. Micah did not speak to impress kings, yet his words outlasted their reigns. He challenged power without seeking it, condemned injustice without surrendering hope, and painted a future shaped not by dominance but by humility. His story does not rush toward closure. It pauses, inviting reflection, asking whether the warning has been heard, whether the promise has been believed, and whether the path he outlined will yet be walked. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell. More Bible figures await.